Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Kernels of Truth, brought to you by Progress, Kentucky. Got a great show for you this week. Very excited to do a bit of a deep dive into the constitutional amendments. Our friend Doug Price is going to let you know what the House is trying to put on the ballot for us as voters to decide. Then we are going to have a conversation with Dr. Brian Clardy, who is a history professor at Murray State University. We're going to discuss the anti-DEI efforts in Frankfort, why the GOP is so opposed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then we're going to close out with our call to action. So it should be a decent show. I'm pretty excited about it. I had a week off. I was off in Washington, D.C., getting re-inspired by our democracy. Just kidding. But I am definitely excited to be back here with you guys. And thanks for tuning in, whether it's live on Facebook, on YouTube. I think we're also on X right now, which some of our members oppose because they say it's just a cesspool. Let us know in the comments if you're watching on X and you think it's a cesspool or not. And then we're, of course, where most of our listeners, I think, are folks who check us out as a podcast after our live show. So again, thanks for joining us, however you're joining us. But before we get into the show, I want to know, are you ready to help turn Kentucky purple? As the bad bills pile up in the Kentucky House and Senate, it's clear there is still lots of work to do in our state to win better electoral outcomes for our Commonwealth. We hope you'll support Progress Kentucky on our efforts to do just that. Make a contribution right now via our secure online website, Act Blue, to help turn Kentucky purple. $5, $50, $500. It all adds up, but it all requires you to voice your support in a tangible and bankable way. So now let's check in with our co-host. Let us know who you are, where you are, what are you protesting today. You there on the internet live, feel free to share what you're protesting today in the chat while we are sharing ours, and we can put it on the screen because we now have that technology. That's pretty cool. I'm Aaron. I'm coming to you from Chilesburg, which is, of course, a Ball Homes community on the outskirts of Lexington. The great thing about being on the outskirts of Lexington, just awfully close to horse farm territory, probably worryingly close to the horses. Really, they're like, hey, you guys keep those ball homes away from our fields, please. But it's a great spot to I'm excited about the weather, because right now we've got that little maybe winter's over, beautiful sunny days. I'm excited to go out and explore those country roads on a bicycle, perhaps tomorrow. We'll see what happens, but that's my plan. What am I protesting today? I guess I'm going to protest just generally the Kentucky GOP, which I know it's not terribly specific, but I kind of sit back and watch what they do every day during the legislature and go, well, I should protest that. I should protest that. I should protest that. And if you, similar to me, have a lot of things you're concerned about the Kentucky GOP and what they're doing with their super duper majority, wait till our call to action, because there's going to be a few opportunities to make a difference and show your opposition to their efforts. So that's me again, Aaron. Doug, I think, Doug, are you there? Are you my co-host today?
Yes, I'm your co-host today. Can you hear me okay?
Now I can, yeah. You seem to be ignoring me for a little while earlier there, and I run up to the show. But I'm glad that all these technical difficulties, if they were in fact technical difficulties, have been ironed out.
Well, sometimes when you don't want to hear somebody talk, there is a mute button. So I'm not saying that's what happened. I was off doing some other stuff. But anyway, I'm Doug Price. I'm from Harrison County, Kentucky, and we probably have more agricultural land in Harrison County than most of the counties across the Commonwealth. So if you want to know more about horses, Aaron, or be around horses or cattle or whatever, you should come to Harrison County sometime. So what am I protesting? Today, I'm going to be protesting tomorrow at the Capitol in the Rotunda at 1 o'clock. The Kentucky Public Retirees Organization, of which I'm a member, coupled with some other organizations, including the Kentucky Government Retirees, is having a rally in the Rotunda. We understand the Governor's going to be there, and this is the T-shirt that I'm wearing. KPR, Kentucky Public Retirees. We're advocating for a cost of living increase that retirees have not had for over 11 years. So if you want to come join us, hop in a car tomorrow, 1 o'clock. See you there.
So that is going to be Thursday at 1 o'clock at the Capitol. If you would like to show up for a cost of living increase, which would be the first one in 11 years. So, you know, stand up for Kentucky retirees, because there's been a fair amount of increases to the cost of living in the past 11 years. That's crazy. I hope that, I hope it's successful. I hope that those folks are listening and they do the right thing and give you guys a cost of living update. All right. Well, thanks for joining, Doug. And you know what? You're right. There's definitely a lot of agricultural land in your county. That is a strong statement to say you think you've got more than any other county in Kentucky, because there's I don't know if you know this, there's 119 other counties that you're competing against. It's not just a handful.
Well, actually 118, because Fayette County can't compete.
We're a big county. We've got a lot of agricultural land. I've ridden my bike through a lot of it. But yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, Jefferson County probably isn't really in competition in terms of agricultural land. And obviously, Fayette County, probably not. But every other single county seems like it's got a fair amount of agricultural land. So I don't know.
I'll tell you what I'll do, is I like to research. So I'll research that. And upon next time I'm on the show, maybe I'll have an opportunity to either prove I'm right or prove I'm wrong.
I mean, if you're wrong, we're going to need to rename that whole segment, because but I'm down. I bet we'll get Nate to cut you a new song. I bet he can do it. He's a very talented individual. All right, so let's get into it. I think what we wanted to start with for the news of the week is the rundown that you prepared for us. Doug is spending the time with the legislature, which we are very glad that he's doing. Spending some time on the website to keep an eye on these different bills that are being filed. We have a specific focus, not just bad bills, but you're going to look at what's going to be proposed as constitutional amendments, which lets us as voters get in on the game if indeed those amendments pass the legislature. And how does that work, Doug? Like, what are the mechanics of I don't want to like ruin anything that might be in your like notes. But how does it work that they would decide to put these amendments in front of us as voters?
Well, in a general sense, a bill is proposed in either the House or the Senate, and it works its way through the committee process and to the House. If it starts in the House, it goes through the House, and then it goes to the Senate, and the Senate looks at it and all that kind of stuff. And eventually, on a constitutional amendment, it ends up on a ballot in the following November. Constitutional amendments do not go to the governor. The governor doesn't have a say. You can't veto them. But eventually they end up, if they're approved by the House and the Senate, they're approved and they are put on the ballot in November. And the reason I wanted to talk about this, we do have a lot of bad bills, and there are a lot of bad bills that are actually in these constitutional amendments. Our Constitution was originally passed in 1891, and it has been amended 40 times in the past 132 years. The Constitution allows for up to 4 amendments to be on a November ballot. Guess how many bills have been filed to be on the November 2024 ballot for us to vote yay or nay? Whatever your guess is, you want to put it in the chat, think about it, and wait till the end of this segment. You'll find out. But I guarantee you will not get close to the answer.
So you're saying that 40 have been passed, because 40 times the Constitution's been amended through Right? Is that what you're saying? So
Yes.
in the history of 100, how many years? What was that?
132 years.
40 times it's
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not a lot.
No,
I
it's not a
mean,
lot.
it doesn't happen a lot.
It's a little more straightforward than amending the federal constitution, though.
I don't really know the process of amending the federal constitution, but yeah, I would say it's less difficult. It takes a vote of the people, the registered voters of the Kentucky who choose to vote. It takes
Yeah,
their vote.
that's not a thing. We don't have those for the federal constitution. We don't get an amendment in front of us as voters to say, I would
That's
like to
true.
get rid of the Second Amendment. I'm not saying I would want to. I would want to. So, all right. Sorry, Doug, get into it. What have we got in front of us this year, though?
That's fine. In my opinion, the Republican-controlled legislature wants to obliterate the co-equal branches of government and is using the process of constitutional amendments as a power play to push through changes in our Constitution. And when we get the opportunity, we the people must speak on these issues. They have passed laws in the past that the judicial branch rightfully determined are against our Constitution. So what do? Let's change the Constitution. They tried to do this with abortion in 2022, and the voters shut it down. I'm going to give you a kind of a brief roundup of the contenders. The newest one that was filed yesterday, HB 4, and a companion bill that had previously been filed, HB 94, states the General Assembly shall determine the date a regular session shall end unless another date is agreed upon by 3/5 of the membership of each house. It also establishes that the General Assembly may be convened upon a joint proclamation of the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House for no more than 12 legislative days annually. Presently in the Constitution, they're detailed on what they can do. And previously, they have tried to pass a bill that allows them to control when they meet. And in my opinion, this is a horrible idea. SB 341 and SB 143, this is an act that where a city cannot allow non-citizens to vote in local elections. Some states, including California, allow non-citizens to vote on local measures. And this bill has already passed the House by an 81-15 vote and is now in the Senate. I think this one will pass both chambers and may be on the ballot in November. But in my opinion, this is a feel-good amendment that is unnecessary. But like a lot of things our legislators propose, it's in vogue across the country. SB 23, HB 11, and HB 62 all relate to a proposal to amend the Constitution of Kentucky to make changes in the homestead exemption that will be beneficial to those who are 65 years and older. SB 10 changes our election dates to allow our current 4-year term executive branch elections to be held on the same November date of presidential elections. I believe that this one will pass both chambers and be on the ballot in November 2024. The logic behind this is that more people vote in presidential elections. I'm in favor of more people voting, but given that so many people in Kentucky still support Trump, then I do have some concerns. HB 2 and HB 208 are referred to as school choice amendments. This would allow private and church schools to obtain public money. This bill is the second highest priority of the Republican-controlled legislature, and this one must fail, and I think it will. HB 295 and SB 117. This proposal would remove the word slavery from our Constitution. In Section 25, it reads, slavery and involuntary servitude are forbidden. Slavery and involuntary servitude in the state are forbidden except for a punishment as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. I think the idea is they want to remove the word slavery. And I expect everyone will be in favor of this, but I don't think either of these bills will make it to the finish line. SB 126. It prohibits the governor's ability to grant pardons or commute sentences beginning 30 days prior to a gubernatorial election and ending at that gubernatorial inauguration. I think this one is silly and should not be on the ballot. Senator McDaniel stated this measure is in response to actions taken by then Governor Matt Bevin, which, if you will remember, occurred as he was going out of office 5-6 years ago. The next 5 bills have no chance of being heard in committee nor passing either chamber. SB 143 and HB 336. This is an amendment to Section 29 of the Constitution related to citizen ballot initiatives. This one received a committee vote today to move to the Senate floor. I don't think they want the citizens involved in legislation. Believe that. HB 160. It involves cannabis, the right to possess, use, or buy at age 21. HB 394 establishes a Citizens Redistricting Commission. HB 302 to establish a right of the people to have a healthy environment, including a right to clean air, pure water, and ecologically healthy habitats. And HB 59, this one, I have trouble reading the legalese sometimes, but this one appears to revise an existing law to provide exemptions for unnamed aspects. So I teased you earlier with how many bills have been filed. There have been 19 constitutional amendment bills filed. And it is likely that I've missed some, plus the session has many more days to go. My bottom line is, I think HB 2 and HB 4 are definite that they'll be passed and they'll be on the ballot. HB 341 and SB 10 are possibilities, but I really don't think there's going to be 4 amendments on the ballot. That's my report on it, Aaron. If you have any questions or thoughts, jump in.
All right, so that was a lot. That was definitely more than I would expect, given the historical track record of constitutional amendments actually becoming amendments of the Constitution, right? So the school choice one, obviously, that's a high priority. The state, Supreme Court has weighed in very clearly that nope, it's not constitutional as our current Constitution is written. So, of course, the Republicans who are desperate to give our private tax dollars or public tax dollars to private enterprises to run education programs, they're going to do whatever they can to address the challenge, right? So that means they have to get the constitutional amendment through if they want to have private charter schools, if they want our tax dollars to go to private schools, which they clearly are desperate to do. But then, I'm sorry, the other ones that you wanted to that you thought were not that you appreciate them or want them to happen, but that you think are going to happen. What do those do? You throw numbers at me and I lose numbers. I'm bad with numbers. But the actual content that they're trying to legalize or whatever.
HB 2, you already mentioned. HB 4 allows the legislature to call itself into session.
Oh, yeah.
And basically what they want to be able to do is if they run out of time trying to pass legislation, push it through or whatever, then they want to be able to say, well, wait a minute, we're not really through yet. We want to add a few more days to it. And it's just bad policy. That they should be able to complete what they plan to complete in the time frame. 341, that is allowing non-citizens to vote. They want to make sure that non-citizens do not vote. we do not allow, we only allow U.S. citizens to register to vote. And we don't have a problem, but it's like I said, it's in vogue across the United States. In California, non-citizens can vote on some matters that are before them that would affect them. And this, in my opinion, this is a bill that, well, some other states are doing it. We want to make sure that it don't never happen here. And the last one, the change the election dates. That would change the date of our executive branch elections to coincide with a presidential election. And the logic does make sense. More people vote during a presidential election, but still it's anemic, the number of people that vote. So, you know, I'm kind of in favor of that because more people will vote, but I'm also concerned too.
Well, you know, I think the Republicans are doing it because they've seen that Democrats have a shot in the statewide elections for governor and the constitutional offices, but they're pretty sure that the kind of cultural like tides will overwhelm any like actual connection to these politicians, right? So, you know, because the federal races, you know, you get folks who are maybe not paying as close of attention for whatever reason, you know. So yeah, I think that I see why they're doing it. They think their prospects will be better. And it saves money and it saves people like the energy of having to run as often, I suppose. But it doesn't really change the duration. It just changes how often voters have to pay attention, right? So instead of like every year for a while, it's like, oh, I gotta get a year off or whatever.
Yeah.
Not that they pay that much attention anyway. I don't know. But there's a savings argument, but that's not necessarily the number one thing that I'm most concerned about as a taxpayer. Is like, do I want to save my tax dollars or do I want my tax dollars to go things that are useful? And I don't think I don't know, what's the downside of having to pay attention to elections? Like, I got plenty of time. I can pay attention to an election every year if so required. All right. Anything else?
I want to see a bill that establishes a commission to try to figure out ways to get more people to vote. Let's do a constitutional amendment on that you have to vote, like Australia. I mean, let's do it.
Yeah, put them in jail if you don't vote. Democracy or else.
Well, we got House Bill 5 for that.
Yeah, put them in jail for about anything. All right, so let's go to my story. It is one that was flagged by Doug. It's a really important issue. It's about basically how much it's going to cost our state if the emergency funding for childcare does not actually get renewed, right? So the federal funding for so many things after kind of or during COVID, that doesn't last forever. We're going to lose some funding. That funding is significant. Our friends at the Kentucky Policy Center have done a survey and an analysis that shows that we're in dire straits as this funding disappears because there's just an enormous amount of need out there. And childcare is one of those like critical things that if we don't have it, we can't have the workforce kind of engagement that we're hoping for. So it really is, it's an important issue. And again, goes to the kind of the whole issue that the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy has spotlighted, that we have got money as a state. Unfortunately, we have a Republican super duper majority that is desperate to pass these kind of austerity budgets that don't spend the money on the actual needs of our Commonwealth. And so that's why it's really, disappointing to hear that about 40% of childcare providers in the state, that there's just a ton of folks who are really hanging on, right? Hanging on by a thread. So about 60% of our our child care centers are fully staffed. So, that means 40% are not fully staffed, which means, not quite the care that you would want. These American Rescue Plan invested $763 million into Kentucky's child care centers, which, very significant resources, which helped a lot of these child care centers hold on. About 6 in 10 of these surveyed child care centers said that their center would have closed in the past 2 years without those payments. So 60% of those surveyed child care centers would have closed without those emergency federal payments. Those payments are going away, which means that it's very concerning that we might see a huge drop off. We will likely see a huge drop off in the amount of available childcare. Childcare is expensive. It is, again, kind of the number one need that keeps people out of the workforce. And without these kind of, it's a horrible kind of business model because so many people's hourly wage is horrible. And so they can't really afford the childcare, and then the childcare centers can't afford to pay the people what they deserve, and so it really is, it's an issue that our economy cannot kind of continue at the levels that it's at without reliable, affordable childcare. And that was one thing that the American Rescue Plan Act kind of figured out, like, oh, this is a huge weakness in our economic model, and we're going to put some federal resources into it to help it, help prop it up, basically. But that was a short-term duration, not an ongoing program, which I think, that's a problem. And we should, in fact, people need, because of inflation, people who were making $10 an hour 5 years ago need to be making at least $15 an hour now, right? Despite the fact that we have not elevated our federal or our state, for that matter, minimum wage. And there's a real need. People just can't work for less than $15 an hour. Basically, now the cost of living is just too high. And so, what are the options? If they can't hire people, if they can't pay people that what they need to live, then they're going to have to shut down. And so, really, it's a great report. It's an important report. It's one that people should read. It's one that our state lawmakers should read. But this is, I'm not hearing a lot of, interest in budgeting these items and increasing the budget for things like childcare payments to support this industry, which I think just leaves us in a really vulnerable spot. And I'm really glad that the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy has done this research and shared this information. It'll be in our show notes. If you want to take a look at it, you absolutely should. Doug, I don't know, you flagged it for us. Anything that that I missed that you think is really important to elevate for the audience?
I don't really have anything to add. It's almost like sometimes I want to just say, okay, let's just let you do what you do, and then let's talk about it in a couple of years when all HELL breaks loose. They just don't, the Republican-controlled legislature, they just don't think very well when it's come to things like this. They have to see it, but they just don't recognize it. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know if we put the link in the chat yet, Annabelle. If you have a second to do that, that would be awesome. So we're going to move on to our guest. But this is definitely, we're going to continue to watchdog the budget process as it develops. Really important that we hold the legislature accountable. Doug, I will say this. You said, like, they don't think. I think they do think. I think they absolutely think, and they know what they're doing, right? It's like, hey, let's just keep cutting the taxes because then we can keep cutting the services, and then we can have a state that's really best for rich people. And that's kind of, I think, their primary motivation. So at any rate, so we're honored to have back with us this week's episode, our first episode, in the month of February. is bringing returning guest professor of history at Murray State, Dr. Brian Clardy. What we love about Dr. Clardy is he's got the historical perspective. He's got a bit of a faith perspective that he brings with him, and he's not afraid to talk about partisan politics either. So he's like really the triple threat for me personally. And I'm really glad to have him joining us again this year. As we kick off Black History Month, we thought we should probably bring on someone who knows a little bit about Black history and history in general. And Doug knows some history because he's old. But we thought that Dr. Clardy could help bring us some precision and accuracy in how we talk about it. Dr. Clardy, thanks again. Okay, I think you might be muted.
Oh, let's see.
There you go.
All right, good. Can you hear me now?
I can. If you wanted to turn your phone sideways again, that's gonna work. There we are.
Go.
Look at
that's
that.
Even better.
I love that trick.
Excellent. Listen, Aaron, thanks again for having me on tonight. Wow, lots going on in this legislative session. I never thought I'd see the day where Kentucky would become Texas and Florida, but here we are.
Yeah, no, they seem to be taking their notes from the Kentucky GOP supermajority seems to be taking notes from those two states for sure, right?
Scary.
And I think one issue I wanted to start off with is the HB 9, which is the anti-DEI bill introduced by Waddy Republican State Rep Jennifer Decker, which would force Kentucky's public colleges and universities to dissolve departments and staff positions related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not the only bill to target DEI, but it's more restrictive than Senate Bill 6, which was filed by State Senator Mike Wilson of Bowling Green. And then Republican State Senator Stephen Meredith of Litchfield is sponsoring Senate Bill 93, which would go after DEI in K through 12 schools. So really, just a really impressive, laundry list of bills that are being, levied against DEI, which of course, I guess, must be one of the biggest threats to our state for sure. What's your take? How do you think that this GOP supermajority is doing in honoring Black History Month to start things off there in the legislature?
It raises the question for me: what are they afraid of? Diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts don't mean in terms of hiring that you have to meet a certain racial quota and that you have to hire a certain number of Blacks and Hispanics and women and across the racial and demographic gamut. That's not what it means at all. When it comes to the hiring piece, all we're saying is that in the past, we have recognized that there were inequities in hiring and that people of color in the past were locked out of the system through systemic racism. What DEI has done really since the 70s, the 80s, and up through now is said, okay, we're going to now try to rectify that by making a good faith effort to make our workplaces and our classrooms and our administrative offices look like America. You still have to be qualified. You still have to meet the minimum requirements for whatever the job is. Once you get the job, DEI does not keep you there. You still have to do your work. But what DEI has done is that it has made it possible for now the workplace, especially in higher education, especially in secondary and elementary education, to make the workforce look a little bit more like America and to make it inclusive and to make it welcoming and less of a hostile work environment. And why the members of the General Assembly, those Republican members, and apparently the supermajority in the leadership, why they want to get rid of this in the Commonwealth of Kentucky is simply beyond me.
Yeah. You're an educator, right? So it does seem like this is, a big part of it. That these bills are kind of targeting state education initiatives at the K through 12 level, and then also at the collegiate level. I guess it's because they just are really concerned that white students, are going to feel, made to feel guilty about the kind of history and legacy of racism in our Commonwealth and in our country. And they are just really desperate to keep them from being, felt to be, held accountable for racism. At least that's what I hear, right? In the conversation about it.
The hiring and personnel piece is one thing. You touched on something very, very important insofar as the curriculum and the curriculum delivery piece. Why are we trying to exorcise African-American history out of the curriculum? Why are we so afraid to talk about the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow? I thought that in higher education, it was supposed to be about the marketplace of ideas, speaking truth to power, and addressing our history realistically. What I'm seeing and what I've been really seeing over the last few years are these political dog whistles. We saw it in the Virginia governor's race a few years ago when Glenn Youngkin was talking about critical race theory. And then, of course, the former president jumped on the critical race theory bandwagon without a clear indication of what critical race theory is. It's not what people think it is. It's a legal construct. And unless you're a first or second year law student at an accredited law school, guess what? You're not going to be learning critical race theory. Okay, so that got old. And then, of course, the appropriation of the word woke and wokeism. This becomes the new boogeyman. If you have policies that are woke, that somehow you're going to destroy the fabric of American life, you're going to poison young minds, and you're going to portray a false depiction of what America is. Okay, that got old. Okay, so now we've gotten off the critical race theory bandwagon, we've gotten off the wokeism bandwagon, and now we're attacking DEI. They're all linked. They're all linked to somehow try to eradicate history, to marginalize the rights, the gains that have been made in civil rights over the last 60 some odd years, and to take us back to a past that never was. And that is profoundly scary. I know that Governor Beshear will most likely veto this. He will veto it. But with the supermajorities in the House and the Senate, it will probably be overwritten. And there we are in a moment. And why people are not as up in arms over this, I mean, I have some theories about it, but this is a 5-alarm fire we have to address now. This is a 5-alarm fire that we have to put out. And because it's happening in our Commonwealth, it's happening across the country. I know everybody is so occupied with the federal election and Congress and the presidential election, but Tip O'Neill was right. At the end of the day, politics is local, and this is something that we have to address as local communities and as a state community and bring our activism to the question. And so this, to me, is a very disturbing moment in the history of this Commonwealth.
I'm gonna throw it to Doug in a moment. I wanted to ask you, what do you think it does to the kind of college experience if they peel back these efforts to include or increase diversity, equity, and inclusion on college campuses? I've got a daughter who's about to head off to college relatively soon. What's the value of these programs, and why do you think they're worth fighting for?
Very, very valuable. And I'll tell you why. I'll just come at it from my own autobiographical experience, having been a college student some 30 some odd years ago. I came from a small town in Northwest Tennessee, South Fulton, Tennessee. Not the most diverse community in the country, very small African-American population. We were taught the lost cause in elementary school and junior high and high school as a reason why the Civil War started. We were fed a lot of these right-wing talking points in history. We were not exposed to authors of different racial and ethnic and gender-based backgrounds. I think we may have been thrown a bone to study Langston Hughes. That was it. I get to UT Martin in 1985. I am exposed to being around for the first time in my life, exposed to Asian students, to students from the Middle East, to students from Europe. We had an RA who was Russian. This is during the Cold War. I'm around folks from Britain. I remember this British tennis player. He and I struck up a conversation about British television. I had never talked to a person from Britain before. I'm learning different ideas, whether it's Marxism, Leninism, the true principles of conservatism. I'm learning about different authors other than Langston Hughes across racial and demographic lines. I left the college experience as, I would like to think, a fully functioning adult, but I also left it as someone who had a diverse point of view, going into a diverse workforce, going into a diverse world. You strip away that now, you're going to give students a myopic view of the world where they do not grow beyond their own comfort zone, where they're going to be uncomfortable dealing with people of color and people across different other demographics, and you're going to stymie their growth. This is going to be arrested development at its absolute worst. And we do students a terrible disservice when we strip away these programs and give them a half-baked education.
I buy it for sure. Doug, any questions for Dr. Clardy?
I want to mention this. We've talked about the DEI effort in colleges, and of course, one of the bills attacks DEI concerns that they have in high schools.
Oh God!
I think I don't know how they think that if they can start controlling kids when they're in kindergarten, then maybe they'll grow up and be like them. It's really crazy. I'm thinking about the legislature. Aaron mentioned earlier that I spend a lot of time watching the legislature, and there's a lot of time there where I'm like throwing things and I don't want to say cursing, but not very happy with what they're doing. Have you seen anything talking about Black History Month coming out of the legislature?
Outright no. Is the legislature even remembering Black History Month? I know they had a big function up in Frankfort not too long ago where the governor and several constitutional officers were, but I don't know. I'm not on Capitol Hill. What has the House, what has the Speaker and the Senate President have done insofar as recognizing Black History Month? I'm not really clear. I mean, have they? Were they there at the event that the governor had, a week and a half ago?
Yeah, I really don't know. I know that they passed resolutions talking about our governor should condemn the actions at the border in Texas. That's something that really concerns us these days. So yeah.
Priorities, huh?
And priorities, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, to me, as I said, all of these issues are linked to fear of the other. Now, you take, for example, yesterday, and when this blew up in the speaker's face, I woke up laughing about this morning. We've got a crisis at the border. We've got a bill that I don't really care for, but a bill that rectifies the problem to an extent. But we're not going to pass that because Donald Trump said no. Instead, we're going to impeach the Secretary of Homeland Security. Now, you talk about misplaced priorities. That's it in a nutshell. And so they're asking the governor of Kentucky. The last time I checked, Kentucky was nowhere near the southern border. And you're asking Governor Beshear to go on record as to doing what now with regard to the southern border?
Yeah.
Seriously? Okay, let's just keep the ballistics on one more thing. It's mighty funny that we're talking about curtailing immigration, but we don't seem to have a problem using migrant workers in our fields to plant and harvest our crops. And the last time I checked, a lot of them came across that same border. It just seems very hypocritical to me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I think the Kentucky horse industry would collapse if they had to pay only for
Kentucky
legal.
agriculture would too.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
crazy.
So, it's the hypocrisy certainly, but I think that idea that Betty had shared earlier, that the DEI is just one more thing they want to use to kind of an issue to fire people up because we really are too far from the border to get people too scared about immigration. And most
And
people who know immigrants, it's because they're in the ag industry and are familiar with the folks who are working very hard at jobs that
yes,
without them, would go unfilled, right?
and,
And I
Aaron,
think
and
that's
you
the dirty
nailed it.
that's the
You
dirty
nailed
secret
it.
of immigration, right? Is that we are, as
Yeah.
a country, we actually need immigrants. We are like desperate for immigrants because our birth rate is like plateaued, if not falling. And if we want an economy that we recognize right now, we are going to have more people working in that economy.
The
So the
thing
fact
is,
that
we're a nation
Republicans,
of immigrants. From
certainly,
the beginning of the founding of this country, we are a nation of immigrants. And unless your name is Geronimo or Sitting Bull or Pocahontas, all of your relatives, all your kinfolks and ancestors came from Africa or from Europe or from Asia, somewhere.
yeah. I did want to and I know you pay attention to national politics, Dr. Clardy, so get you a little bit on this one because there is that nexus to Kentucky's politics. So Mitch McConnell seemed like he was pretty all in on getting a deal, and then he was told very clearly that no, we are going to back off your immigration. Give you Republicans what you've wanted in immigration, not give the Democrats necessarily what they've wanted, but they'll give them something. And make sure that there's the resources for Ukraine, the resources for Israel, and resources also for the Palestinians as well. So it's kind of like, here's the grand bargain, something we're going to work on and get across the finish line. And then Trump weighs in to say no. Mitch says well, looks like he doesn't want it, so I guess that's fine. I guess that's what we have. It just seems awfully cynical. I don't know. What's your take on how our leaders in Kentucky's delegation responded to this train wreck?
When I saw Senator McConnell's remarks yesterday, I kept thinking of that Simon and Garfunkel lyric, "Where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? Our nation turns its lonely eyes to you." And I remember the Mitch McConnell of the 1980s and the 1990s. Yes, he was conservative. Yes, he was an acolyte for the Reagan presidency. But Mitch McConnell was, at least in those days, a pragmatic Republican who could have worked when he wanted to across party lines, and he was very reasonable and sensible. The Mitch McConnell from 1980, 85, 86, 90s, would have jumped immediately on that deal because it gave conservatives a lot of what they want. I mean, progressives. I watched Senator Padilla on television yesterday from California. Progressives don't like this deal. Progressives will hold their nose and vote for it, but progressives have a problem with this. And for this conservative deal to come across, and just because Daddy Trump said no, and to watch a seasoned, experienced, influential statesperson like Mitch McConnell, a person who, to me, redefined what it is to be a Senate Majority Leader. He will go down in history as one of the great architects of Kentucky politics in the modern era, but he's also, sadly, and I hate to be this blunt, he's going to go down as a coward now, because this is another instance where he caved into Donald Trump. And he knows better.
There's a reason he is where he is, right? And that is because he is very good at kind of reading political winds and tacking, right? And so he saw what he was up against, and he's like, yep, the right thing is not this thing. This is the best deal is the thing that's in front of us. Okay, but I'm not going to run into a buzzsaw on principle, right?
But you know what upsets me the most about this, about his caving in on this? This bill was more than just about immigration. Ukraine funding was tied to this. Yeah. The Ukraine freedom fighters and Zelensky and all those folks, they are running out of bullets. They are running out of ammunition, and the Russians are making inroads into Ukraine.
So we know that
Ukraine goes, we are in a moment, because
it
is not going to stop there.
if Ukraine goes, NATO is engaged, right?
We're in trouble.
The fact that that Ukraine is not a NATO member right now means we do not have to respond in kind. We can just pay off, But if we can't because the House says no, because Mitch isn't able to kind of marshal the forces that are necessary, right, from the far more sensible Senate. We're as he said, we are in a world of hurt for sure. And I guess we know that Rand Paul, Putin's postman, is more than happy for this outcome. And there is a strain of republicanism that is all in with Putin, right? We know that Tucker Carlson's going to interview him this week or something crazy.
That's scary.
Right? And that's part of the Republican DNA now, is this pro-Putin, pro-strongman, pro-Christian nationalist identity. And they're all good with that, right? So it's harsh times, and I think, as you pointed out, Mitch McConnell is a kind of a bastion of yesteryear, and is not the current crop of Republican leaders. And that's I would if you told me 4 years ago, I would be mourning the passage of the type of Republican that Mitch McConnell represents and leads.
Exactly.
I would call you crazy. But here we are.
I'll go you one further than that. If anyone had told me that the party of Ronald Reagan, the party of Mikhail, the same guy who walked arm in arm with Mikhail Gorbachev down Red Square in June of '88, declaring the end of the Cold War and the beginning of a new relationship with the Soviets, the same person who had prior called the Soviet Union an evil empire. If anyone had told me that the party of Ronald Reagan would be the same party that would capitulate to an aggressive, strong Russian leader, I would have called you crazy. But here we are. And it begs the question to me, the Republicans are siding with strongmen like Putin and Erdogan and Orban. And it begs the question, who's benefiting from this? It certainly isn't the long-term national security interests of the United States. It certainly isn't Europe. It certainly isn't Ukraine, because I'm going to tell you something. What's going to happen is, if the Ukrainians lose this war, Putin is not going to stop there. And if he goes into an Article 5 country in Europe with NATO, we are in a war for real. And the Republicans have an opportunity to stop this, and they won't.
Maybe we will be. If Trump's back in power, and if he gets elected once, he's probably in there for life. And what we do know is that he doesn't like NATO very much, right? So it is chilling to kind of see this all play out.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm terribly concerned.
Our national security is in trouble, and our democracy is in trouble if Donald Trump is even within a hair's breadth of the White House. And, normally I look forward to presidential elections. Normally I look forward to watching them and watching the projection of them. And I get very excited about election night. I'm terrified about this one.
Yeah, we got a few months to prepare. But I feel you, Dr. Clardy. We don't often talk about national politics. We know what our lane is, which we focus on Kentucky politics, but that trajectory of touching on Mitch McConnell, and then I brought up Rand Paul, and next thing you know, it's we're all over with it. But I will say this: I think I appreciate your view of Frankfort. I appreciate your engagement. Any final thoughts you'd want to offer on the kind of where we're at with this current super duper majority in Frankfort and its efforts to peel back equity and inclusion efforts?
The same efforts and the same energy that we brought to national-like issues, like the killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, the same impulses that we brought to 2020 to make sure that Donald Trump was denied a second term on a national level, we have an obligation and we have an opportunity now to marshal that same energy in our local communities and at the state level. We should be marching on Frankfort right now. We should be all in our state legislators' offices. We should be bombarding them with emails and letters and phone calls and texts and however, smoke signals, whatever. We should be all on top of this, all of our state and local leaders. Stop waiting for a Martin Luther King to come save us. That's not going to happen. We have to be the ones that we're waiting for, and we're going to have to be the ones that are going to have to take the bull by the horns and say enough.
Yeah, that's for sure. Thank you, Dr. Clardy. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank
Open
you, Aaron.
invitation. Love to have you back. Let's
Anytime,
not wait
guys.
so much this time. But again, we're gonna close down the show quickly because I know our producer's got a hard stop coming at us. And you take care. We'll touch base with you soon.
You know where to
right,
find me.
Absolutely.
Anytime.
We're gonna move on to our call to action, which I think it flows very well from what Dr. Clardy was just telling us. We need to be marching on Frankfort. There's a number of folks who are encouraging you to show up, to come out. There's a rally for reproductive freedom on February 13th. That's Planned Parenthood. It's the ACLU, that whole crew, a wonderful group that we are proud to work with. Please show up on February 13th. You can either show up for a reproductive freedom rally or the KFTC lobby We Love Voting Rights Day. It's also on February 13th. So there's a couple of good opportunities to show up there. Happy to be partners with KFTC on a number of issues, the Kentucky Future Project and others. And then the next, there's a day off. And then the 15th is Moms Demand Action, their gun violence prevention. Advocacy Day. We had Kathy on last week. We love Moms Demand Action and love the work they're doing. Really important opportunity, I think, this session. So show up on the 15th. And then the next week is the Fairness Campaign's lobby rally day on February 21st. So LGBTQ plus issues, which tough sledding right now, and showing up is really important. So please do so. And thank you so much for considering coming out, because that's really what it takes. As we just heard from Dr. Clardy from Murray State, it's really important we be marching on Frankfort. Like, if we want different outcomes from this group of legislators, we need to hold them accountable and show up. And so there's 4 options for you in the next couple of weeks, and I hope you'll take advantage of one of them. We know Doug's going to be on out there on Thursday, which might be today, depending when you're listening to this podcast, or if you're watching it live, it's tomorrow. So for retirees and giving them a cost of living update, which they absolutely need. All right, Doug, any other thoughts on this episode or this subject matter?
No, I think it was a great show. I learned a lot, and it's always fascinating to listen to somebody like Dr. Clardy, who is so intelligent and so up to date on issues.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, you want to close us out?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Progress Kentucky is a nonprofit organization registered with the Kentucky Secretary of State and organized as a 501c4. We're affiliated with the Indivisible Project, the Commonwealth Alliance for Voter Engagement, referred to as CAVE. They're also proud members of the Forward Kentucky Network. Progress Kentucky's goal is to educate, organize, increase voter turnout, and advance a progressive agenda through civic engagement. Next week, we'll be joined by another wonderful guest, Misty Skaggs with EKY, Eastern Kentucky Mutual. Production of episode 148 was by Annabel Nagel. Big thanks to Nate Orchan, who wrote and performed our theme songs. You can find more information and music at natosongs.com. If you miss our weekly live stream on Facebook or YouTube, audio podcasts and our show notes are available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcast. If you do listen to the pod, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you are listening right now. Logo and some graphic content provided by Couchfire Media. More information can be found at couchfiremedia.com. See you next week.